Hello, Chris Temple here with Indie Rebel, Hollywood effects without a Hollywood budget. Today I have a very exciting tutorial. We're going to recreate yet another VideoCopilot.net classic. And today, as you can see by the screen, it is the train explosion. This is an old one from, I want to say 2011 to 2013, somewhere in that era. And I really loved it when I was still using After Effects. And I said, it'd be fun to try to apply this to Fusion. So let's take a look at what we're going to be creating today. Go back to the beginning and play. Sam lawyer running, big explosion, tanker flying through the air, another explosion so tanker hits the ground. And there's a lot going on. We've got Roto. If I come back here, we can see we've had to roto out him. We're rotoing out the train, creating mats. We've got stuff flying through the air, trying to composite different things together. We're dealing with Z-depth compositing as well. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that we're going to cover in here today. I also want to say, not to toot my own horn, but this took me about 4 hours to translate it from watching the Video Copilot tutorial and making it work over here inside of Fusion. So I just want to show you a couple really cool things with this. Now, disclaimer. This is not necessarily a beginner-friendly tutorial. If you've never done any sort of compositing before, or you've never even touched Fusion before, this is probably not the tutorial for you, because I'm going to assume that you already know some basics about stuff. However, if you are a beginner in Fusion, you have started dabbling with it, or you've got extensive experience with Adobe After Effects, then this might be a great tutorial for you, because I'm going to be comparing this to the AE way as well as to Nuke as well in certain cases too. So if you're brand new to Fusion but you have experience with other software, follow along. You may find this beneficial. Now, before we get started, if you want to follow along, go to VideoCopilot.net, click on Tutorials, and you're going to scroll down to the Explosive Training. Click on that. And then you'll find a red button that says, I believe it says Download Project. Click on that. You'll be able to have all the same assets that I do. Now, your asset folder will look something like this. And we're going to find, a plugin for After Effects, some 3D textures, footage, and some Fume effects and tanker model stuff. All we're going to care about today is the footage folder, because we're just working on the compositing. We're not doing any of the simulations ourselves. We're working with explosions that maybe you would get from Action VFX and that sort of thing. However, if we go into the footage, you'll find these 5 clips. I found that they were not reading for me or loading inside of Fusion Studio. So I actually had to run these into DaVinci Resolve and create my own ProRes files. So I used either ProRes 422 if there's no alphas. Okay, we can see that this is a ProRes 422 file. Or if I needed an alpha channel, then I did it as ProRes 444, which you can see right here. So you can convert those inside DaVinci and then load them up into a separate folder. Mine's just called Mine, and then we're good to go. So let's get started. I'm going to create a new composition here inside of Fusion Studio. This will also work inside of the Fusion page inside DaVinci Resolve Studio as well. There are going to be a few tools that are not available in the free version of Fusion, and I will try to remember to point that stuff out as we come across them. First thing I want to do is I want to make a single viewer, and I'm going to bring in my footage here. It's called Plate. Let's bring that in and view it. We will now come up and fit this to frame. And actually, I'm going to just scale that up a little bit so I have more working room down here in my node graph. We can see that our footage is 112 frames long, and I can see that right here as well. I now want to set my entire comp to be 112. And now my timeline that spans across the center of my screen is just 112 frames. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and watch this from the beginning. And we can see Sam Lawyer running, and there is nothing exciting happening. It is up to us as the VFX artists to make this look like something really, really cool. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I want to do a track, because I'm going to want to bring in my explosion and my tanker flying through the air and debris and stuff like that. And I want to make sure that it can all sit and fit nicely into the scene. Now, we could do a 2D point track on this. There's enough detail up here. I think we could probably make that happen. However, I'm going to show you how to use the planar tracker to do this, because the planar tracker will actually average a bunch of points together and give us a much more stable result. So let's go ahead and add a planar tracker. And I'm going to set my reference frame to the last frame. So I want to come to the very end of my shot, and we set the reference frame. There might be some instances where you want to start your planar tracking in the middle, but in this case I want to start it down here at the end. I'm also going to change my motion type from perspective to translation rotation. And then now I can come and create the search area for my tracker. And that should be good. So I'm encompassing a little bit of the trees back here. I want to get the top of this train, and then the power pole in the background, and then some of the lines. So this should give us enough data to work with. And let's track backwards. Perfect. That actually worked out really, really well. Nice. All right, our final step is to create what's called a planar transform. And this is very similar to a tracking null inside of After Effects. Whenever you apply your track data, either from Mocha or even the built-in trackers, you put it into a null object. This is that null object that we're going to be copying and pasting and linking all of our footage through. I don't need my actual tracker itself anymore, so I can go ahead and remove it. And we'll just keep it up here off to the side just in case we need to reference it again. Next step, let's go ahead and bring in the explosion. Okay, and here it is. Let's go back to the beginning. And Andrew Kramer did this inside of Fume Effects, which is a plugin for 3ds Max. And it looks pretty good. It needs a little bit of work. You might be able to find better ones from Action VFX and such. And in fact, I know I've got better explosions. However, I did want you guys to be able to follow along with what I'm doing. So we're just going to go ahead and use this one today. Let's go ahead and run it through our planar transform, and then merge that on top of our footage. And take a look. And it starts off okay, like I can see the explosion, and then we hit frame 60, which is when our tracking data starts, and we can see it begins to jump in, but then we hit frame 76 and the explosion disappears. And that's because if I take a look at my explosion, I can see that it is 76 frames long. It ends on frame 75, whereas my actual footage is 112. So what I want to do is I actually need to offset my explosion and move it to a different point in time, because I want my explosion over here on the last half of the shot, not the first half of the shot. One, that's where my tracking data is, and two, that's just where I want the explosion. It's going to look a lot better that way. Now, if you're using the free version of Fusion inside the free version of Resolve, you will probably need to open up your keyframe editor, and from here you can see a bunch of layers, and this will allow you to actually move things around and trim off your shots that way. I don't like having this open all the time because it really is kind of a pain in the butt. It just takes up space here inside my node graph. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Instead, what I want to do is I'm going to click on my explosion, and because I'm running the studio version, and you can do this inside DaVinci Resolve Studio as well, we have a global in and out, and we also have a trim mode down here. And using these two controls together will allow me to offset this how I want. So maybe I want to take off the first 15, 16 frames. I can now slide this over, and let's figure out when I want it to start. Looking at my shot, I would say I want my explosion to start right here, probably on frame 62. So I'm going to slide this gray bar over until I see the number 62 right here on my global. So there it is. And then I can extend back out the end. So now, theoretically, we should have no explosion in the shot. And then right around frame 62, we'll see it, and it should be tracked in all the way to the end. And it works. Perfect. All right, now let's go ahead and position the explosion where we want it in our scene. We want to add a transform node, and we want to add it before the planar transform, not after. If it goes after the planar transform, it's going to offset that planar transform and it won't look right. So we want to put our transform node beforehand, and I'm going to kind of place it maybe back here and scale it up just a little bit. It doesn't need to be much. Somewhere like that. And place that down here. Let's go ahead and watch it again. I'm a big advocate, by the way, for watching your shot constantly and seeing how things are going. I can't stand compositing a bunch of stuff only to watch it later and then figure out why it's not working. And that's looking really good. All right, now we may notice that we have a little bit of a problem here, and that's that currently the explosion is blowing off Sam Loya's head. And while that was not uncommon in these tutorials back in the day, that's not exactly the look that we're going for. So what we want to do is we want to stencil out or matte out Sam himself from the shot, so that way whatever we add in can go behind him. Now, if you're using the free version of DaVinci, and thus the free version of Fusion, you're going to need to roto this out yourself. And the best way to do that is with either a MultiPoly or a polygon mask. So I will go ahead and, for fun, just kind of show you really quick what you'd be looking at doing. You're going to bring up your polygon while viewing your footage, and we're going to come and add an outline around the different body parts. So here is his head, and then you could do another one for the torso and another one for the arm, and then you have to actually go through and keyframe this throughout the shot. And the first time I did this tutorial here in Fusion, that was actually what I did. I actually tracked the head throughout the shot. It took me about 10 minutes to roto it. And I said, there's got to be a better way. I'm using the studio version of the stuff, like there should be a better way. And there is, if you're on the studio version. And the answer to our problem is something called Magic Mask. Now notice I'm putting my Magic Mask down here on the bottom. If I go back to my original comp, we can see that I merged things in from the top and I matte them out from the bottom. And it's just a really easy way to stay organized. So here's my original plate going straight through. You want to have a solid pipe, and all my mattes come in from down low, and then all my added footage and assets come in from the top. So we're going to do the same thing here. Let's run our footage into the Magic Mask and view it. And I want to find a good frame to start with. In fact, let's go ahead and fit this back again. And this one here is not bad. This one is kind of like Sasquatch, right? He's got both arms fully visible. We've got his head. We've got the rest of his body. So we're going to go ahead and use this one. To use Magic Mask, all I have to do is I can have an eyedropper with a plus sign. And I'm going to just quickly try to grab the bits that I want to keep. And if there's anything I don't want, like this little bit of the train up here, press and hold Alt. It turns into a minus, and then we can come in and remove it just like that. So this is not perfect right now, but it should be good enough to get us started. I'm going to go ahead and track it backwards. All right, and that's looking pretty good. And we're going to come up back here to our keyframe, and I want to track forwards. And that works great too. So now I have this alpha channel, this matte of Sam running around like a wild man in front of nothing. But what it will allow me to do is to put him on top of the train, or on top of the explosion. So we also have some matte options in here, and we can come in and blur out the matte just a little bit if we wanted to. And the other thing I might do, come back to my tracking, is make it better instead. So let's go ahead and retrack this with better. And we can see that that just adds in some of the motion blur and stuff, and that's going to help us out. We'll do the same thing here. All right, and I'm pretty happy with that. That looks great. By the way, these three circles up here at the top of your viewer allow you to toggle between your alpha mode and RGB, and you can also choose to view certain color channels as well if you wanted to. All right, let's go ahead and view our shot again. And I'm going to click on my Magic Mask and go to my matte options and click invert. And then I can run this into the mask input of the merge. And now what we've done is we've actually cut Sam out from the explosion. So we're not actually stacking him on top, we're matting the explosion and letting us see through to him at the bottom. So that's a little difference coming from a layer-based system where you're actually going to put your mask on top. In this case, we're just masking the element that's coming in. Cool. That is looking great. Now the other thing I want to matte out is this train car over here. And because I want the explosion to be behind this. So first off, we do notice that the shot is moving and thus that train is moving. So let's go back to the end, which we've already set up with our planar transforms and such. And I want to freeze this frame. And the way we do that is with something called a time stretcher. So we're going to add a time stretcher, run our footage into it, view it, and then set it to whatever frame we want to hold on. In this case, frame 112. And now we can see the entire shot is just frame 112. So we'll do all of our work here, and then we'll reintroduce the motion afterwards. Next, I want to go ahead and start with my key. I'm going to pull a Luma Key up here on this section. To make things a little bit easier, I'm actually going to add a color corrector first, and I want to desaturate the image. Let's go ahead and view it so we can see. So now it's black and white, and I'm going to increase my contrast. And that's just going to make these little bits here pop just a little bit. And I'm dealing with a very solid white and a very solid black with a couple shades of gray, and all that's going to carry through. Now let's go ahead and add a Luma Key here and view it. And we can see that that does a really good job. I haven't even had to tweak anything. And all I'm concerned about is this little area right here. I don't care about the rest of this. I only want to know what's going on in this quadrant. And to further isolate the effect, I can go ahead and add a polygon mask and mask off this image. Like that. And we'll run that into the mask input of the Luma Key here. And now that's the only section that's being affected by that. The other thing I might do is bring this down here and there, and that will help mask out that antenna junk from the back. Now the next thing I want to do, let's view our time stretcher again, is I want to roto out the train. And because I'm only going to have to do this on one frame, I can spend the time to do a really good job on this. Now notice we have this little cutout right here, right? There's a handle that comes down, and I want to keep that area in my final shot just because it'll add a little bit to the realism of it. So in order to do this, we're going to use a new node that's new to Fusion 20, and that is the MultiPoly tool. So let's go ahead and click over here. We're going to add a MultiPoly. And I'm going to start with my main train body. In fact, I'm actually going to rename this. We're going to call this main train. Hit enter. And let's go ahead and take some time to give it the best darn roto that we've ever done. All right, so we got that all closed off and that's looking good. Now notice here at the end of it, I came around the outside of that handle. What I want to do now is add another roto for the inside. Let's give ourselves some more room to work here. So in the MultiPoly tool, I can add another polygon. We're going to call this one cutout. And now I can come in and get the inside of this, basically cut out the hole. So there. Just like that. Now here's the tricky part. I want to have each of these with different settings down here. So my main train, I'm going to keep on merge for the paint mode, but I'm going to go ahead and invert it. And the cutout, I'm going to change the paint mode to replace. So let's take a look and see what we've done. If I go ahead and view my MultiPoly now, we can see that I have a beautiful alpha channel cutout of that part of the train. Now all that's left is to combine this alpha, let's go and view our alpha channel, with the alpha that we got from our Luma Key up here. So let's see if we can combine these two together. And we're actually going to do that with something called a channel Booleans node. So let's go ahead and click on our Luma Key, and we will add channel Booleans. Make sure it's the plural one. And then our MultiPoly, rather than running the mask into a mask input like we normally would, we're actually going to run it into the foreground input, to the green one. Let's view that channel Booleans. And we're going to change the operation from copy to and. And that combines the mats together. Channel Booleans, by the way, for those of you guys that are coming from Nuke, this is kind of like your shuffle node. We can move things around. So to the red, or let's say to the alpha channel, I could put my red channel and whatever I want to do. So this is where you're going to be shuffling stuff around. Just know that here it's called Channel Booleans. All right, let's go ahead and resize this a little bit, get back to our RGB values, and bring that down. So now what I want to try to do is, just to make sure it's working, we'll bring our explosion over. And I'm going to run the output of the channel Booleans and replace the mask from our magic mask. So let's see what that does and view it. Yep, and that has worked out great, but only on the last frame. I also need to bring in the planar transform. So we're going to copy that and paste it after the channel Booleans. And what that does is it moves our mask around the shot. In fact, if we view it, we can see that that mask is now animated to the scene. So let's view that merge. And sure enough, that is tracked in beautifully. If we want to add a little extra realism to it, we can take that planar transform and go to settings and turn on motion blur. And with this enabled, we can see that we can now actually have a little bit of motion blur throughout the shot. And I like increasing the quality of mine a little bit, just to make it nice and smooth. All right. So that's looking pretty good, but now we're back to that same problem again, where Sam's head is being cut off. And you might have figured out by now that we can use that channel Booleans to combine our alphas together. So that's what we're going to do one more time. I'm going to take my magic mask, add another channel Booleans. Oops. We're going to take the output of our planar transform, run it into that channel Booleans. We're going to set it to AND, which combines them, and then take our output into the merge. And now we can see both Sam and the train are being cut out from the same shot. So let's go ahead and just organize things up here a little bit more. All right, and that's looking pretty good. What I might want to do now to help me stay organized is I'm going to drag my matte down a little bit. I'm going to put my magic mask back up. You'll see why in a little bit. And I'm going to throw this group of nodes here into something called an underlay. And we're going to make it lime green. And that's just for me to keep track and realize that, hey, this is a matte that I pulled. Now notice we have another issue here. Because our matte is being animated by the planar transform, we're losing the top of the explosion here because it's actually matting it out. If I view the matte, we can see that that area is just masking out the stuff. So a real easy fix for this, I'll go back to our original here, is to simply take a copy of our explosion and merge it on top and mask off that top half. So I'm going to take my planar transform, merge it on top, and then I'm going to just really quickly add another polygon mask. Boop. And we'll run that into the merge right there. Let's view it. And now we filled in the missing part of our image. Easy peasy. The next thing that we want to do is we actually want to color correct our explosion to match. So if I fit this to my frame and come down like this, we can see that it's a little flat looking. I mean, even though it looks pretty good, it's flat. It doesn't have all the oomph and the utzfa that it needs. So I'm going to take my explosion, move it off to the side, and let's get to a frame where we can view it. And I like viewing it where there's a little bit of the black from the smoke coming in too. And we have a couple different things we can do. We could add just a regular color corrector if we want. And from here, we can play with the saturation, maybe a little bit of the contrast. And notice that when I do that, it's affecting everything. And that's because when we add our color corrector, we need to go to our options and hit pre-divide post multiply. And that cleans that right up. Now it only affects the RGB and not the alpha channel too. That's actually looking really good. I like that. That's actually better than the first one I had. Cool. All right, finally, I think I'm going to go ahead and just kind of realign my stuff here a little bit more. Move that down. I'm going to go ahead and move these up about like that. And we will throw all these into their own underlay as well. An underlay. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to make it orange so it matches our explosion. So we can look at that and know green, I think of like green screen, so I'm matting. So I always make my mats green. And in this case, an explosion is going to be orange. Let's go ahead and bring in our tanker asset now, the train crash itself. We'll merge that on top. Take a look. And we can see we have that same problem as before, where it's only here for 52 frames. So let's do exactly what we did before. Again, if you're using the completely free version of stuff, go into your keyframe editor and find your train asset, which is going to be your most recent loader. Or in my case, just click on the train asset and slide my globals all the way over. Now, there's the train there. Let's view it. And that's looking pretty good, except it needs to be tracked in. So we're going to go back to frame 112. Take our planar transform, copy, and paste. And then I also want to go ahead and add a transform node because I want that to be a little bit bigger. If we look, we can see that that train is a little bit smaller than what it should be. So we're going to add a transform again before the planar transform. So let's go ahead and scale that up a bit. Something like that. And let's see if it lands where we're happy with it. It's not bad, might be a little big. We can shrink that down just a smidge. But I do like the position where it's coming from. That's looking really nice. All right, let's go ahead and mask this out. We can see all the debris coming in front of Sam's head, but we don't want to use the same mat we created before because I don't want to mask out this part of the train. I want to see the debris flying in front of it. So I'm only going to use the matte output from the magic mask. So we'll put that in there. And if I press and hold Alt and click on my line, I can add a connector, a pipe router, or in Nuke we'd call it a dot node. And that allows me to keep my comp nice, clean, and organized. So already, even though we just have a small comp going on here, you can start to see really the power of this node-based compositing, right? I'm using multiple assets over and over and over again through different parts of the image without having to read in a new version every single time. Now, having just said that, there are going to be times where I do want to copy and paste an asset. And a great example is going to be the explosion. Because I think it'd be really cool when the explosion hits to add another, or when the train hits, add another explosion right down here at its base. And in order to do that and to have it offset properly, the easiest way is simply to just duplicate what we already have. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this entire underlay, copy. We're going to come down here, give ourselves some room and hit paste. And we will merge that planar transform into the shot and view it. And I'm going to use my transform node from before to change the explosion up a little bit. I'm going to flip it horizontally, so we're looking at a totally different explosion. I also want to scale this down quite a bit as well. We'll make it a smaller explosion that hits down here at the bottom as the train lands. Let's see how that goes. Cool. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to offset that explosion in time. So we're going to take that explosion. I'm going to bring my full amount of frames back in, maybe trim off like just the first one or two, and then slide this over to when I want the explosion to start. So in this case, I want my explosion starting on frame, let's see here. Let's go and disable that for a sec. When it hits right there, let's say frame 93. So we're going to take our explosion, trim this way down, and we're going to move this over till I see 93 in my start frame. Got to trim it down a little more. There it is, and then extend it. So you can see how easy it is to use these global parameters to adjust the timings of stuff. Let's re-enable that. Okay, And maybe I do want to make that explosion a little bit bigger. So let's go and scale that back up and position it somewhere right there. And let's watch this whole shot from the beginning. Back to 1, play. And that's looking really good. Let's go ahead and, just to be safe, add another roto from Sam over that first explosion. I don't know that we need it, but let's do it anyway. Again, press and hold Alt, click, and then we can drag this in line. Clean that node back up. And again, we're just trying to keep a nice constant connection with everything, right? Now what I want to do is I actually want to use a Z-pass to add depth to the shot, because right now that explosion is just plastered on top of the train car and it doesn't necessarily look the way I want it to look. So if I bring in a Z-pass, and we'll put it down low because it's going to be a matte of some sort, I can use this to matte out the explosion itself. So let's go ahead and view it. Okay, same thing as before. It's been offset in time, right? So I need to match what I did with the actual tanker explosion. So I'm going to click on that. And I can see I'm using 0 to 51, and I slid it over to the end. So I can click on my Z-pass, 0 to 51, slide it over to the end. Now that should all match up beautifully. So if I theoretically click between the two and view them, those line up perfectly. And a Z-pass is a black and white image that actually has some grayscale data to it that we can use to create our matte. And what I want to do is I want to compress that data to control exactly what's being viewed at a certain point in time. So let's go ahead and, for fun, add a curves node and view that. And if I can come in here and crunch this down, we can see that I'm controlling what part of the image is visible. So I want to find where the tanker hits, right about here. And let's see if we can crunch that a little bit more, like that. And maybe we'll pull the top back just a little. All right, now we need to create an alpha out of this. And as you may have guessed, we're going to use a channel Booleans again. So I'm going to actually use 2 channel Booleans, and you'll see why here in just a moment. So I'm going to add one, I'm going to add another. On my first channel Booleans, I'm actually going to flip my operation over to negative. Okay, so that actually inverts the image. And then I'm going to take my second one and copy to my alpha my red channel. All right, so nothing appears to have happened so far, except now I've got this great holdout. If I didn't have the invert, my alpha would be backwards, and that's not what I want it to do, right? I want it this way. I want to keep the explosion and cut out that tanker. So let's go ahead and actually delete our little dot node up there in that mask. We'll view our merge, get out of our, or get back to RGB, and run the channel Booleans into it. And now I can see it's starting to cut it out the way I want to. However, we have another problem. And that's that the size of this is not matching the size of our train. Now I could come in and copy both the planar transform and the regular transform. In this case, I do want the planar, so I'm going to copy that. And then we're going to paste it to our Z-pass. Move it up. But instead of copying and pasting the transform node, I'm going to link it to another one using an expression. And this is a great way to teach you about expressions. And the reason why I want to do this is because there might be a time where I want to actually change the size and position of the tanker, and I don't want to have to remember to copy and paste that transform node. So let's add a transform between our channel Booleans and our planar transform. Okay, there's my transform node. And I'm going to go ahead and pin it to my inspector. And pinning allows me to then open another node and still have that first one available. Okay. And let's go ahead and name these here so I can keep track of them. I'm going to call this one transform 2 is now going to be, if I hit F2 on the keyboard, train transform. And my other one, if I hit F2, I will call Z transform. So currently I've pinned my Z. Let's bring up the train. And this is going to be really cool. I can right click on a parameter. In this case, maybe it's the center, or I know that I did change the size here, but we're going to do both the center and the size. If I right click it and click expression, I have a pick whip, just like in After Effects. And I can pick whip to the parameter on the train transform. So in this case, I'm going to go center to center. And then I'm also going to do the same thing for the size on my Z transform. So I'm going to right click size, expression, and pick whip that size to the size of the train. And now look at something cool. If I grab my train transform, watch my Z transform parameters as I do stuff. I can move it around and it's all linked together. You can see both these values are completely in line. It also works with the size. If I change the size, it's now 2.59 here and it's 2.59 here. So now my Z pass and my train are tied together. And that's really, really handy and very powerful, because now I only have to change one thing at a time. So let's view our final shot. And we can see now that that explosion is wrapping around the train. Okay, it starts off kind of in front, and then it comes around to the sides and in front. The other thing I might want to do is just quickly throw on a blur to smooth things out, like that. And then we can call that good. Let's go ahead and put this matte, into its own. And we'll throw it in underlay. And again, it's a matte, so we're going to make it lime. Make it a green color. All right, let's go and unpin our Z transform here. Now it's unpinned. And if I click on a node, I only have the one available now. So let's see what we have. Let's go back to the beginning. And that's looking great. And I don't think we need to combine that matte with Sam. I think we're looking pretty good the way this is. I'm happy with that. Cool. All right, finally, we just have a little bit more debris we can add. So I got a debris layer. Okay, and just like before, guess what? Take our planar transform, copy it, paste it onto the debris. Let's go ahead and merge it on top of the shot. And we're also going to need to offset it. And I'm going to make this debris come in as that train hits. Right through there is where I want that debris to come from. So that is on frame 95. So I'm going to take my debris. We're going to trim it down a little bit and set it up to be on frame 95. And actually, I know from looking at this that it's kind of frozen for a moment, and I want it to start right there. So I want to trim off about 4 frames. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Then offset that to 94, one more, 95. Extend to the end. View that. And that just gives us some extra junk flying through the air. And that's looking really good. Cool. As a final step, I might want to add some sort of glow to this. And the soft glow is nice because it actually gives us some threshold controls. So I can take my threshold, turn that way down. So I'm getting just the bright parts there. And change the glow size, something like that. All right, let's hide our nodes, fit that to frame, and view our final shot. Now, notice how it's glowing everything here at the beginning. I actually only want the glow to be affecting the explosions. And so what I can do is I can actually keyframe my blend mode. So if I want my glow to start maybe right around through here, I'm going to turn my blend down. And actually, let's back it up a little bit more. Boop, 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 right about there. Set a keyframe for it. And then I want my glow on here, and now I'm gonna turn that blend up. And what we've just done is keyframed it, so then it kicks in. And we could tweak this and fine tune this a lot more if we wanted to. Maybe that's too much gain on that. Turn that down. Turn down the threshold, or turn up the threshold. And just add just a little bit to it. It's not much, but just adds a little something. All right, so just to recap, we started off taking our footage and adding a planar tracker to it to get us these planar transforms that we used throughout the entire comp. We learned about magic mask and using that to roto Sam out from the shot and saving a lot of time doing that. And you can see when we add in the motion blur, it's definitely good enough. We learned how to use the Luma Key and the MultiPoly to add cutouts to our mats. We learned about channel Booleans and how we can use that to combine mats as well. We also learned about Z-Pass compositing and using that to cut out assets that are within our scene. And really just kind of learn how to offset things in time as well. And as you can see, it was really quite easy to do. There was a little bit involved, but it wasn't difficult by any means at all. So with all that said, go ahead and let me know in the comments below what kind of tutorial you would like to see next. I thank you so much for watching. My name is Chris Temple, and you've been watching Indie Rebel, Hollywood Effects without the Hollywood budget.